Have you ever just stopped and really thought about the invisible lines we draw on our dinner plates? Why one food is a total delicacy and another one is just completely disgusting, maybe even immoral to eat? Well, today we're going to dig into the secret history of our food taboos. I mean, it's a question that seems so simple on the surface, but the answer is incredibly complex. For instance, why is a hamburger, just a regular Tuesday night dinner in one part of the world, while in another place, that exact same animal is sacred? And the thought of eating it is, well, it's a deeply offensive act. The lines we draw, they feel so real, so absolute to us, but they are completely relative, right? What's the deal here? What makes a pig a feast but a dog a friend? Why are insects a perfectly normal crunchy snack for billions of people, but a source of total revulsion for so many others? Well, the answers are hiding in this fascinating place where our deep biology, our complex cultures, and the long winding road of human history all smash together. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to break it down. Here's our game plan. We're going to start with the biological hardware we're all born with, that gut feeling. Then we'll see how culture comes in and basically programs it. We'll look at the rules that pop up, and then we'll dive into two huge case studies, the pig and the cow, before we look at the taboos that are being born right now, today. So, first things first. Before we can even get to culture, we have to start with that primal, gut-level feeling of yuck. Seriously, it isn't just you being picky. It's a super powerful survival tool that's hardwired into our brains. There's this idea, right? It's called the pathogen avoidance theory. And basically what it says is that disgust is our ancient built-in alarm system. Think of it like your body's own personal bouncer, standing at the door of your mouth deciding who gets in. It was shaped over millions of years of evolution to protect us from all the nasty stuff, germs, parasites, toxins that can make us sick or even kill us. And this system works on some pretty universal triggers. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from. These things are probably going to set off that alarm. A maggot-infested carcass, rotting food. Our brains are wired to see these things as giant, flashing red lights that just scream, danger, do not eat. This is our biological foundation. But here's the thing. If it were all just biology, we'd all eat the same stuff and avoid the same stuff. But we don't. And this is where things get really interesting, because it brings up this fantastic puzzle every single human has to solve. It's called the omnivore's dilemma. See, unlike a koala that only eats eucalyptus leaves, we humans can eat an incredible variety of things. And that's a huge advantage, for sure. But it's also a massive risk. Every new thing you see is a gamble. Is this berry going to be a great snack, or is it going to be the last thing I ever eat? How do you figure it out without, dying in the process? The solution, the thing that lets us solve this crazy dilemma, is culture. If our disgust instinct is the hardware we're born with, culture is the software that gets installed. We learn what's safe and what's totally off limits by watching our parents, our friends, our whole community. That yucca reflex, it's programmable, and our culture is the one writing the code. Okay, so let's see how this cultural programming creates these powerful, unspoken rules. We don't just see a random jumble of animals out there. Our minds automatically, without us even thinking about it, sort them into these neat little categories. The anthropologist Edmund Leach laid this out perfectly. We create these mental boxes. First, there's the self box. That's for humans, and they are absolutely not for eating. That is the ultimate taboo. Then you've got the pet box. These are the animals we give names to, the ones that become part of the family. And eating them? Yeah, that feels wrong, almost like cannibalism. Then you've got livestock. Pigs, cows, chickens, animals that are pretty much defined by their purpose as food. And finally, wild animals, which might be edible, but usually with some special rules or rituals attached. Where an animal lands in these boxes, that decides if it's a friend or if it's dinner. And this table here perfectly shows how those mental boxes get scaled up and written down into these huge religious systems. We're talking billions of people following these dietary laws, and they're about so much more than food. They're about identity, purity, your connection to the divine. It's interesting, right? You see the overlap in the pork prohibition in both Judaism and Islam, but then you have these key differences, like the special reverence for the cow in Hinduism, based on this principle of ahimsa, or nonviolence. So, with all that in mind, let's grab that pork taboo and see how these ideas actually play out in the real world. Because the story of the pig, it is not what you think. It's not some simple story about a dirty animal. It's a whole drama about cities, class, and identity politics. Okay, get this. This is a mind-blowing fact from archaeology. In the world's very first cities, places like Uruk in Mesopotamia, way back around 3500 BC, pigs weren't just around, they were the #1 source of meat. It actually makes perfect sense. They were the ideal city animal. They eat garbage, they don't need a lot of space, and they reproduce fast, giving the working class a cheap, steady supply of protein. So this timeline, it shows the pig's long, slow fall from grace. This did not happen overnight. But around 1600 BC, you start to see things change. Sheep and cattle, which were easier for the elites to control, started to become more high status. But the real game changer happens right around here, 1200 BC. Suddenly, you see this cultural dividing line. The Philistines on the coast, they ate pork. The Israelites up in the highlands, they didn't. What you ate became a badge of who you were. So when you boil it all down, the famous theories you hear, about disease like trichinosis or about the desert climate, they just don't hold up to the archaeological evidence. The taboo became solid not for practical reasons, but as a powerful symbol of identity. It was a way for the Israelites to define themselves against their enemies, first the Philistines and later the Greeks and Romans, who absolutely loved their pork. Not eating pork became an act of political and religious defiance. Now, if you thought the pig was complicated, let's turn to an even more charged and complex taboo, the sacred cow of India. This isn't just a story about loving an animal. According to one of India's most important thinkers, it's a story about a bitter religious war and the strategic weaponization of a food taboo to create a brutal social hierarchy. The picture we have today is really clear, right? The cow is revered, beef is forbidden for devout Hindus. But if we rewind the clock and look at the earliest sacred texts of Hinduism, a very, very different picture comes into focus. The evidence from the ancient Vedic texts is pretty startling. Far from being forbidden, beef was an essential part of the diet, even for the highest priestly class, the Brahmins. Animal sacrifice, including cows, was a core religious duty. In fact, honored guests were literally called Gogana, which means killer of the cow, because slaughtering a cow for them was the highest sign of respect. But then, over time, a complete 180. Cow killing goes from a sacred act to a mortal sin. What on earth could explain such a dramatic U-turn? This is where B.R. Ambedkar, one of the main architects of India's constitution and a fierce social critic, comes in with a radical theory. He argued this wasn't some sudden spiritual change of heart. No. He said it was a calculated political strategy in a long, bitter fight for dominance between the established Brahmanism and the rising new faith, Buddhism. So Ambedkar's argument breaks down like this. Buddhism was getting super popular, partly by condemning the Brahmins' animal sacrifices, which a lot of people didn't like. So to fight back, the Brahmins didn't just copy the Buddhists by giving up sacrifice. They went to an extreme. They gave up meat altogether and turned the cow, the main sacrificial animal, into a god. It was a strategic masterstroke. It created a brand new dividing line of purity. And those who kept eating beef, well, now they weren't just outsiders, they were committing a terrible sin. And in Ambedkar's powerful analysis, this is the ideological root of the social ostracism that became untouchability. A food choice was turned into a permanent inherited stain. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? From our gut reaction to some rotting meat, all the way to the grand political dramas of ancient empires, what we choose to eat tells a story. Our food taboos are born right at that intersection, where our ancient survival instincts meet the constantly changing software of human culture. And this history isn't just about the past. It gives us a playbook for understanding the food debates that are raging right now. And that brings us right back to today. Because if history shows us anything, it's that these lines are never permanent. So as we stand here at this crossroads, debating the ethics and identity of lab-grown meat, insect protein, and the rise of veganism, we have to ask ourselves, what new taboos are we creating right now? Which foods are moving from one box to another? The secret history of food taboos is far from over. We're writing the next chapter with every meal.